I've been in 55 degrees of heat and fighting in Iraq. It's horrible. There's a threat to our way of life through climate change. We need to do something about it, and the military must play its part. My name is Lt Gen Richard Nugee. I am the lead for climate change and sustainability for the Ministry of Defence.
I'm Hugo, Stanford-Tuck. For the last 10, 11 months, been working on climate change strategy, sustainability strategy for the Army.
My name is Damian Flanagan. I have been looking at the impact of military activity on carbon emissions to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We were, I suppose, slightly surprised at the lack of urgency associated with what that might entail.
As a species, we haven't yet triggered something which says this is the most important thing we need to deal with. It affects our children. It affects our whole life. It has a material effect on me, but it will have a material effect on my family.
Climate change sort of enacted extreme weather events has gone up by 60% in 3 years. And that's just in the UK, that's not counting overseas operations.
We know that there is an increasing insistence of our local communities.
Last year, the dam collapsing in Derbyshire, the Air Force went out of its way to try and save that dam. A flood costs emotionally, physically and economically.
If environmental conditions become more volatile, the call for that from our military personnel will only increase in both frequency and scale.
At 2 degrees, it probably looks broadly like what we have now, but worse. Add in some sea level rise and some temperature increase. Those systems which are already fragile become ever more fragile, more prone to break. So to all the current security hotspots, all the current issues, magnify those and do some spillover. And that's at 2 degrees. At 4 degrees, I just don't know. And at 6 degrees, I don't think anybody knows, what country, what region, what this. I wouldn't even like to hazard a guess, but higher temperatures equals more violence. Fewer resources equals more violence in some areas, and I would argue in other areas people become more collaborative and share better. That would be the ultimate, right, wouldn't it? If resource scarcity resulted in people collaborating more effectively and more efficiently. To give you the broadest theme possible, it's the social human impacts of climate change that will impact most heavily on what the Army is called to do over the next 50 years.
The environmental impact, particularly for a military, is potentially considered to be someone else's business. But by logical deduction, that means that the environment around you is untenable in 30 years' time, and you have been complicit in a large degree in contributing to that deterioration. Then what is it that we are achieving?
It doesn't help me enjoy playing with my children.
My boys are young. They are yet to get to the point where they do start just poking me about it.
And I think anybody who's got, young children alive today, I think will be the focus of their anger in about 20 years' time when they go, why didn't you do something?
I am determined that I don't turn around and say, well, I lived in perpetual casual indifference, and this is the cost that you now have to bear. Then at least I will be able to show a degree of face to them.
I have a couple of boys and I want to give them the best possible life. Of course I do. I want to give them every opportunity in life. But they can't do that if they're in 50 degrees of heat or 45 degrees of heat and are having to just survive. That's not the answer to human nature. We do survive, but we survive by innovating and by developing. We need to be able to react to what's happening and be able to help them as much as we possibly can so that it's not just survival for them.
I think there are myriad ways that we can show good environmental leadership.
The National Audit Office reckoned our emissions, and its public record, was about 3.2 million tonnes of greenhouse gases a year. I think I can get that down to zero by 2050. I want to start with the estate, trying to make the estate as net zero as we possibly can, and ultimately try and make it a net sequester and energy provider. We have 2% of the UK land mass that we are responsible for, either we own or we are responsible for. That gives us, to a certain extent, a duty. From now on, every single piece of equipment that we buy, one question that has to be answered is what is the impact of this piece of equipment on the environment, and what could we do to make it better? If I get this right, we will end up at the end of the year with a really clear blueprint of this is what we need to do to make us better, to make us more environmentally aware and more environmentally friendly. We must do everything we possibly can to become as green as possible without damaging our operational capability. And I would argue that actually some of the things we're doing will enhance our operational capability rather than reduce it. I'm fiercely proud of the armed forces. I think they're fantastic people. They're people who have seen some of the worst, certainly if you've been on operational tours like I have seen some of the real horrors that can happen on a battlefield. They want to get this right. They want to do something about this. And there's a huge positive energy coming out of the armed forces to do this. And we need to harness that, and we need to do something about that, and we need to benefit from that. But I see that as a real positive.